So when I was about 8, my family and I were on a road trip, and my dad and I had gotten into a pretty heated argument. I can't remember what we were actually arguing about, but whatever it was, I really wanted to win. Though obviously a 40-year-old man is able to make much better points in an argument than an 8-year-old, so I was obviously losing. So what did my 8-year-old self resort to? Profanity. I looked straight at him and said, "I know the N-word, you know." But now I had backed myself into a bit of a corner, because I only knew that there was a word beginning with N, but I had no idea what the word actually was, so it's safe to say I was a little stuck. And then my father turned around, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "I'm not black, though." But because he wasn't looking at the road, he crashed and died, and I survived unscathed, so I think we can say I won. Anyway, that story doesn't really have much to do with the rest of the video, apart from the fact it took place when I was 8, which was also the age when I played my first porn game. From the moment I booted up Living with Sister Monochrome Fantasy, I was utterly enchanted, consumed by the feelings of bliss washing over me like a tsunami. And ever since then, eroge has been my most played genre. But now, in case you missed the fact that this is a channel dedicated to game development and have just been watching it thinking that I'm just talking about some hypothetical games that I want to make, I've been making games for 6 years. Now, I've made everything from survival RPGs, to visual novels, to bullet hells, to strategy games, to the video game equivalent of having suicidal thoughts.
My goodness, this is just so exciting! I can't believe that the school actually brought us to a so-called private forest to actually camp out for the night. And Rose is here too, in the same campsite as us. But she's obviously asleep right now. We're the only ones up on our campsite. Hey, I know we're only 12, but you told me one time that your mom said you're allowed to date. So why don't you ask Rose?
Even after all this time, I still haven't made a game in my favorite genre of all, hentai. It's almost impressive how I've been developing games for 6 years but have never made a porn game. I mean, that's just one of the things all game developers make at some point in their career. But maybe it's because hentai is my favorite genre that I'm afraid. Afraid of messing it up. I have such big ambitions and dreams for my dream porn game, and it's always just been an idea I knew it would never come to fruition. But then I remembered something. I went through the exact same thing before making my game 8th Day Kishimoto-kun. I had such big ambitions for a visual novel, though I thought I could never make one. But one day, I decided to just bite the bullet and make one. And even though it has a lot of flaws, it still came out well. I wrote a whole 5-hour-long visual novel, and it was actually pretty good. So if I could do it once, I can do it twice. But I knew I could never let myself get too ambitious with this project. But with having had the desire to make this game for years now, I wasn't sure how I'd be able to manage that. Until I realized that I could just give myself a really short time limit, and I'd be forced to scale the scope of the game way down. So with that, I started a 48-hour timer and got to work. I would have to manage my time well, or else risk the game coming out poorly. So it might seem a little bit silly to most of you that I spent so long on writing the game design document. Well, you see, for no matter what kind of game you're making, the planning and preparation is just as, if not even more important than every other aspect of development. Having been making games for 6 years, I've become well accustomed to writing game design documents. But I had never made a porn game before, so I knew I'd have to do some research into what actually goes into making a successful porn game. So I started with just examining statistics. Reddit was a pretty good place to start, as it's infested with Grandmaster Vader level rumors. Now, I did want this challenge to be interesting, so I didn't want to rely on Reddit for all my research, but there was just one thing I wanted to check here before I started writing up the design document. If hentai or normal porn was more popular. And to my delight, everyone seems to be on the same page as me, as the r/hentai subreddit is significantly more popular than its live-action counterpart. I wanted the game to be hentai anyway, so I was quite happy with this result. The next, I wanted to look into some examples of popular hentai games. And there is no better place to start with than the two most popular, Nekopara and Sex with Hitler. Don't click off yet if you somehow haven't already. I don't care how much I want to make this game good. Absolutely nothing is getting me to play, let alone buy, a game called Sex with Hitler. Like, that goes on some kind of record, right? Like, that transaction could be used against me in a hypothetical court case. So yeah, I'm not buying the game where you fuck Hitler. But now the game where you fuck cat girls on the other hand. Now, despite my large investment in hentai games, I've never actually played Nekopara. And boy, when I did, I was blown away. You see, almost all eroge have one big problem, which is that the writing is too good. You know how people sarcastically say, I watch porn for the plot? Well, eroge fans actually do. Any inexperienced eroge newcomer just trying to jerk off will be severely humbled by the end, which will usually leave most people in tears. Eroge is often extremely heartfelt and emotional, and usually doesn't even have that many sex scenes. But while that's cool and all, thinking about the meaning of life doesn't exactly turn anyone on. The good writing in Eroge has always been a pet peeve of mine, but Nekopara is the first Eroge I've played that doesn't have that issue. Nekopara's writing is absolute garbage, but the character design is almost perfect, a great combination for a porn game. The garbage writing isn't actually the worst writing though. Instead, it manages to hit the sweet spot, where the writing isn't good enough to distract you with a compelling plot, world, and characters, but it isn't so painfully bad where it also ends up distracting you. The writing's not awful, it's not mediocre, and it's definitely not anything above would be painfully bad if this wasn't a porn game. But if you really do want to experience a visual novel that does fit into the last category, well then you're in luck, because there's an all ages version. Lucky you. Anyway, after playing Nekopara, I could see why it was so successful. And it helped to know that the visual novel format can be majorly successful for this type of game, as not only was it what I wanted to make, but it also meant I could just recycle code from Kishimoto-kun. Fully knowing that bad writing would make the game better was also a reassurance, as I had very little time to program a game, let alone write all the dialogue and do all the art. Now I had to decide on a plot, and for this I continued my research. I'm sure we all know the very famous Shakespeare quote, "Nobody makes porn quite like the Japanese." So I looked into what were the most popular porn genres in Japan. NGR was way at the top and has been for almost a decade. And if you're wondering what NGR is, it's basically just a very professional sounding way of saying cockery. So now I knew that I'd have to include cockery in my game, and I understood why. You see, there's a certain mystique to cockery, specifically with a person who your spouse is cheating with. Us humans are naturally inquisitive on things that we don't know about and things that don't make sense to us. The rush of adrenaline one receives after discovering they've been cucked is quite exciting. Allegedly. So I knew I'd have to utilize this piece of psychology as much as I could, so I tried to think of things I could add to my game, along with cockery, that would fulfill the latter part of my statement. And then, it hit me. Femboys. Oh my god! Femboys, by nature, are something that we, as a society, struggle to make full sense of, thus it may add to the thrilling aspect of the game. But something was missing. I knew I could go further, so I had to think of one more thing. And then, it came to me. The perfect idea. I'm gonna ask you guys a question. What's something that humans both don't know about and can't make sense of? That's right. So now I had crafted a plot in my alien femboy cockery game and was ready to move on to the technical side of development. But by now, 24 hours had already passed because I had spent so long playing Nekopara. It probably didn't help that it also took semi-frequent 5-hour-long breaks to continue playing Nekopara. So I had already used up over half of my time, but things only became even worse when I realized that I'd forgotten to eat, drink, sleep, or go to the toilets this entire time, so I ended up passing out and sleeping on my piss-covered floor. When I woke up, I barely had the energy to stand. I was so hungry and had a raging headache from my lack of water, so I ended up falling over, my conscience drifting. I had given up. But then, out of nowhere, Chocola from Nekopara came from the sky and looked right into my eyes. And all of a sudden, I felt my energy coming back to me. Nekopara had saved me. I had survived. I knew I had to finish this game, no matter what. So I walked back to my PC with newfound confidence and determination. I was going to finish this game, even if it was the last thing I'd ever do. So I opened up my game engine and I got to work. First, I went into the files of Kishimoto-kun, and I just did a little copy and paste. And with that, the programming was basically finished. Now, all that was left were visual sounds and writing. Now, I knew the art would be a problem, as I can't draw in an anime style at all, so I didn't really know what I was going to do when it came to that. But then the image of Chocola's face came back to my mind, and after that, I realized how much effort was really put into her character design, and how little effort I cared to put into mine. So I decided to deal with VR only when I had to, and put it off while I worked on other aspects of the game. The writing was one of the most important parts of the game, and luckily for me, I wouldn't have to put any work in. But even then it would take a long time, and my dopamine-deprived ass just wanted the game to be finished. Wanting instant gratification, I instead started with the music, one of the most important parts of a visual novel, and I ended up composing this ballad. Now, there was a problem though, which is that I had no time to compose an entire soundtrack for this game. But even though the song doesn't fit with the game at all, I didn't really care that much, and by this point, I decided that this one song would just play on repeat the whole game. All the menus and dialogue and sex scenes, it would never stop. Next was the writing. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you will know that I've sort of been a writing prodigy since birth, having written such masterpieces as I Was Sitting in an Old Chair, which is literally just somehow even worse version of Under the Peak Tree, and quite possibly the worst romance novel ever written. The last title is not satire, by the way. I'm obviously being sarcastic, both those books are genuine ass. So having written such garbage in the past, I figured it would be pretty easy to write a script of a similar caliber to that of what I wrote when I was 12. But then I encountered the problem of someone living in a first world country to end all problems of people living in first world countries. My writing was too good by this point to write a porn game. It was about half an hour after I sat down to start writing the script, and when I was already about 400 words into the opening monologue from a protagonist on the meaning of life, that I realized this. So I started again, and made sure to include 0 monologues to make sure I wouldn't drift off into some introspective rant. This time, I opened up the game with the protagonist and his alien femboy his alien femboy spouse walking home together. Now this was meant to be a transition into the first sex scene of the game, but it was only when I got about 3,000 words into the couple's conversation on the Industrial Revolution and its devastating consequences for society that I realized I had slipped up again. Well, as we say, third time's the charm, so I started a new draft and this time decided to start it right in the action. But then I found myself writing them having a conversation about the problems of the modern day education system as the protagonist was having his back blown out. No matter what I tried, I ended up including some kind of social commentary or philosophical message or both, as well as tons of nuanced character development, insane plot twists, and even more. I really didn't know what to do at this point, and my time was running out. But to make sure I got some progress done on the game instead of just sitting in front of a blank Google Doc with my head in my hands, I decided to move on to the art and come back to the dialogue later. Well, that was what I was going to do until I remembered that I can't draw and immediately went back to staring at a blank Google Doc with my head in my hands. I was really stuck at this point. Once again, a feeling of hopelessness and despair washed over me. Wait. Despair? Danganronpa? At first that thought was just a little funny thing that popped into my head, but it did get me thinking about Danganronpa. The second volume is really good, and despite volumes 3 and 1 not being the best, volume 2 is so good that I just perceived Danganronpa as a very good series of games. But the more I began to think about Danganronpa, and volume 1 in particular, the more I came to realize that my game needed writing like the first Danganronpa game, and thus I'd attempt to go off it. And it definitely helped that Danganronpa also has a femboy character. So with a full up chocolate face in my mind, I was once again filled with determination and continued to work on the script. The way I would write is that I'd have Danganronpa running my Switch next to me, and I'd be reading it as I was writing the script. And every time a really stupid writing decision came up, I'd go, I could use that, then shoved it into my game, word for word. Random murders and arguments that happen in my game now really helps to make the writing garbage, and makes the plot feel bipolar. So, now that the writing was finished, I'd finally come to the art. It was at this point, even looking at Chocolate's face instilled a sense of dread within me, as I knew that I wouldn't be able to draw art like that for this game. I genuinely had no idea what to do. I got so desperate, I even tried using AI to generate the art. Though my prompts were rejected for being too inappropriate, I was hopeless. I cried, I pissed myself, I vomited. I even got close to playing sex with Hitler for inspiration. Well, that idea was thankfully put to rest pretty quickly. I was lost. I didn't know what to do anymore. Until I remembered. I have friends, and one of those friends is smart enough to make their own AI image generation model for me so that I can generate the art. At this point, I knew I wouldn't be publishing the game. As a creative, I know just how damaging AI generated content can be, but at this point I was desperate. I just wanted to finish this game. And then, I remembered the original reason I started this challenge. Ever since I played my first hentai game back when I was 8, I had an idea for an overly ambitious dream porn game that I thought I'd never make. This challenge was so that I could make it, so that I could bring this childhood dream to fruition. This wasn't about money or popularity or YouTube clicks, it was about me, and my 8-year-old self-dream. I was going to finish this game, even if I had to use AI art, for me, and for me only. Already, I had gone on such a journey, I'd almost died. I had found a new favorite game. I had found love. I had to continue. I had to continue living my life the way I wanted to. And I wanted this game to be finished. And as I write the script of the video, I've just realized. I slipped into an introspective rant about self-worth and life fulfillment. I went ahead and approached my friend and asked him for an AI image generation model. Then I was faced with devastating news. He couldn't do it. This news had made me pretty pissed. I had genuinely thought we were friends, but apparently not. So I did a reasonable thing which most people would do, and broke into his house and said, "Haha, I'm gonna eat your newborn sister," and lifted his newborn sister to my mouth. But just as I was about to take the first bite, he began shouting at me. It's safe to say I was a little more than confused as to why he was throwing such a fit over my snack. Then he began to berate me for my lack of care towards human life. And then I put his newborn sister down. And before I knew it, we were having an introspective conversation on the fleetingness of life. We talked for hours by the time our conversation was finished. I only had 2 hours left. How was I possibly going to get any art and add it into the game at this point? Not to mention the fact that I still needed to create all the UI and add in all the dialogue. I tried to explain to my friend again just how much I needed the AI image generation model, but he told me that he still wouldn't be able to do it. So there I was, sat on my computer screen, hopelessly staring at the code. I had no clue what to do. And then, before I knew it, my time had run up. But I didn't feel like I had failed. Even though I didn't finish the game, I went on an adventure. So much had happened, and I had had an experience I wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I love making games. I get to experience the feeling of spending hours debugging only to finally fix that one bug. I get to experience the feeling of slowly expanding my portfolio and seeing my skills improve. I get to experience other people playing my games. I get to share my messages with the world. Even if some ideas never come to fruition, that doesn't mean it was a waste of time. It was a learning experience. All in all, if there's one thing you leave this video with, it's that you should always remember to fail fast, learn faster. So, even though I didn't finish the game, I didn't fail. I had an amazing time, and I hope you did too. For those of you wanting to play this game, well then too bad, because it never existed and this is an April Fool's video. I've been me, and you've been you. If you don't subscribe, oh, not really, and yeah, bye.